And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. On this podcast, we're going to start talking about the concept of externalities. And externalities are a specific example of the general concept of what we call in economics a market failure. And I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail at the end of this video. But let me just say in general what a market failure is. A market failure, there are two types of market failures. A market failure is when the economy, when the market economy leads to an inefficient outcome. The market economy leads to an inefficient outcome. And there are two ways that this could happen. One is you could have a situation where the benefits of producing some good are greater than the cost, but it doesn't happen. Okay? It doesn't happen. For some reason, the market fails to produce the product. Or the other possibility is if for some good, the production of the good, the costs outweigh the benefits, and it does happen. For some reason, it does happen. So both of those would be inefficient. If the benefits outweigh the cost of producing a good and it fails to get produced, that's inefficient. That's a market failure. Or if the costs outweigh the benefits and it does get produced, that's also a market failure. That's also inefficient. And one particular type of market failure is an externality. So what exactly is an externality, and how does it create inefficiencies? So first of all, an externality is a spillover effect on non-consenting third parties, and I'm going to show you what that means here in a moment. But just in general, it means that somebody who is not involved, the person who is not involved in the trade, is affected by it. They are either harmed or helped by the trade, even though they are not involved in the trade itself. It's some non-consenting third party. So let's kind of get a visual of what this looks like. So here we have two people who are internal to a trade. Okay, they are internal to a trade, and what I mean when I say that is these are the people that are involved in the trade. So this guy, let's say this guy, he's the producer. He produces widgets, some good. He produces widgets, and then he sells them to this guy over here, who is the consumer of widgets. Now, both of these people involved in the trade, they consider themselves to be better off as a result of the trade happening. They consider the benefits of the trade to be greater than the costs, or else they wouldn't do it, right? If this guy didn't think that the benefits were greater than the cost of the trade, he wouldn't do it. And if this guy didn't think the benefits were greater than the costs, he wouldn't do it. So in other words, what we would say is this, quite simply, that this guy, the producer, he values the dollars that he gets more than the widgets that he has to give away. And this guy, he values the widgets more than the dollars that he gave away. And that's why they engage in a trade. And so as an economist, I say, everything else being equal, this is efficient. It's great. We're creating lots of happiness in the world. The benefits outweigh the costs, and these guys are enjoying this trade. Everybody's better off. However, there is the possibility that there's some third guy, some third person who was not involved in the trade, and he suffers as a result of the trade for some reason. So, for example, a typical thing that might happen is that when this guy produces widgets, it creates pollution. Maybe pollution goes into the air, and that pollution that goes down into the air, it harms this guy. This guy gets sick. He has to go to the doctor, and so that's very costly for him. So this guy is going to have to incur costs even though he was not involved in the trade. He's going to be harmed even though he was not involved in the trade. But here's the problem. These two people up here who are internal to the trade, these are the two people that are involved in the trade, they do not take this guy into account. They don't really think about him when they're engaging in the trade. This guy just thinks, I'm selling widgets and making money, and this is great. And this guy's like, I love widgets, I got to pay for them, but all right, I'm willing to. This is great. I get some widgets. So these guys are all happy with this trade that's going on, and they are not taking into account the fact that they are imposing costs on this guy down here. Okay, that they are imposing costs on this guy down here. So these guys, the two guys that are internal to the trade, that's these guys right here who are internal to the trade. They care about themselves. Okay, they are rationally self-interested, and they do not consider the costs that they are imposing on the non-consenting third party. Okay, and I say that he's non-consenting because he did not agree to the trade. He wasn't even involved in it, and that just means he's external to it. That's why it's an externality. He is external. He is outside of the trade, and he's suffering as a result. All right. So it might be that for the people inside the trade, the benefits outweigh the costs. Okay? When I say private here, that's what I mean. The people that were internal to the trade, the private benefits that these two guys get from the trade might be greater than the private costs, and so that's why they engage in the trade. That's why they do it, because they're both better off. However, if we took into account everybody in society, which in this little three-person society, that means that we would now take this guy into account. If we took into account everybody in society, then it may be that when we add these costs in, that the cost for society is actually greater than the benefits. Okay? That for everybody in society, not just these guys, but everybody in society, it may turn out that the costs, when this guy's costs are taken into account, that the costs for society are greater than the benefits, And so the costs of all society, including the external third party, this guy, are taken into account. Costs outweigh the benefits. Okay, so what's the big problem with this? Well, the big problem with this is that for society as a whole, the costs outweigh the benefits. But here's the problem. Here's the market failure. Here's the inefficiency. It still happens. The trade still happens. And why does the trade happen? The trade happens because these guys right here, they do not take that third party guy into account. They don't take him into account. So the costs outweigh the benefits, but they don't take that into account. They don't consider the costs imposed on this guy, and so they engage in the trade anyway. So for society as a whole, the costs outweigh the benefits, but it still happens. That's what I said right here at the beginning. The costs outweigh the benefits, and it still happens. This is our definition of inefficient, and it's what we call a market failure. Now, just to finish this up, this particular type of externality is what we call a negative externality, And the reason why it's called a negative externality is because this non-consenting third party is harmed. That non-consenting third party, he is harmed by the trade. That is called a negative externality, and it creates an inefficiency. It causes goods to be produced even though the costs outweigh the benefits. Okay, so that's a little bit about externalities. We'll talk some more about them later. Thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan on another Econ podcast, and we'll see you on the next podcast.